Well, hi, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Um, A Night at the Opera, The Marriage of Figaro. My wife and I have been watching operas now, probably for close to 50 years, almost as long as we've been married. We were introduced to opera and classical music concerts by her late doctor, who she used to work for, Dr. Samir Mikhail. Dr. Samir Mikhail, who was an amazing man. And he was Egyptian born and of the Coptic religion, and he knew lots about everything and spoke about 6 or 7 languages. An amazing man. But anyway, we used to go to the operas with him and some of his friends on a regular basis when he was in Adelaide, and that was great. So we started off at a relatively young age. We never had an interest in opera when we were young. We were more interested in pop music like the Beatles and all that sort of era, the 60s and the 50s music, and then a little bit later. And then the Christian gospel music, of course, we were very keen on that. And but we got introduced to opera. And so we started going. And I think the number of operas that have been on in Adelaide the last several years, we've seen many of them, and some more than once. And we've followed the careers of young people, some people we've known in the operas that were performing there. And we've followed their careers and watched all the new people coming along, and it's been fabulous. And we don't necessarily like every opera and go to every opera. Some of them are a bit too modern for us, and they clash a little bit with some of our values, some of them. However, we do enjoy a night out at the opera, and we've seen The Marriage of Figaro before, and my wife was trying to recall it, and I said, yeah, I can remember parts of it. But it's not this is a modern version of The Marriage of Figaro. It's the same music, but it's set in modern times. And one of the interesting things is when they're passing notes back and forth between each other, they're not using written little notes, but they're texting on mobile phones. So that'll give you an idea of what it's about. If you want to go and see it, it's still on a little bit longer yet in Adelaide, so grab a ticket. It's very interesting and quite good and very well done. A first for us was that we actually had seats in the front row, and we were right alongside the conductor. And that was amazing. By having a seat in the front row, you could see there's little holes in the fence that separates you from the orchestra, which is the orchestra pit underneath the stage. And it was brilliant in that you could actually, I was quite often just watching the orchestra at the same time, have another eye on what's going up on the stage above, and following what was going on with the orchestra. And I got a new appreciation for the conductor. I'll give you the names of the people involved in this production shortly. But he was amazing, and so much effort. I don't know how they do that every night when they're performing these operas. Anyway, so it was great. There's the program. We always get a program up in our attic. We've got programs going back for 50 years of all sorts of musicals and plays and everything. Probably a great collector's item for someone someday, but it might all get chucked out when we're gone. But The Marriage of Figaro, there you go. So what can I tell you about it? There's an ad for Candide. We've seen that before too, performed by the State Opera. That's coming up next year, so we might go and see that. That's a fascinating opera and play. Figaro and Susanna, Our Crazy Day. A welcome from Mark Taylor, the Executive Director of State Opera of South Australia. And there's some words from Dane Lamb, who's the Artistic Director, and Nicholas Cannon, who's the actual director. And Nicholas Cannon has been a performer in the State Opera for some years as well. I think this was his, I don't know whether it was his debut in directing, but there was a big article in the local paper about a week ago talking about him and the opera. So the music of Figaro, there's all sorts of information here. These programs are always good to look back on. I've got a little book here. I couldn't find it, on Stories from the Opera, which covers about 50 different operas, a little hardcover book produced back probably 80 years ago or something rather like that. And I quite often just have a read of that just to get the synopsis of the operas that we're going to see. Anyway, it says here, The Marriage of Figaro The Marriage of Two Worlds. The Marriage of Figaro was by no means the first opera to include characters from the worlds of both opera seria, serious opera, and opera buffa, comic opera. But in this work, Mozart's musical language shows how artificial such distinctions are in life and art. In Bartolo's La Vendetta, musical rhetoric from opera seria, magisterial lines, harmony and rhythms is soon undermined by the buffo-style patter. The man is a windbag anyway. That's an aside. I guess Gilbert and Sullivan is what you would call buffer opera, which is all fun and games and but beautiful singing. And we've seen a lot of those over the years as well. There's a line here, it says, the human condition on stage. And that's an interesting thing too. There is lots of things on stage here that are depicted. Nicholas Cannon. Here's a few comments here from some of the people who are involved in this. Nicholas Cannon. This is a very political show. There are already a few traditional period versions of The Marriage of Figaro. So when I was asked to direct it for State Opera, we thought it would be interesting to do a modern production in a modern setting. If you look at The Marriage of Figaro as an opera, it's set in Seville in Spain. The source play was written by Beau Marchais, that's probably not the right pronunciation, who's a Frenchman. It's composed by Mozart, who's Austrian. The Italian libretto is by Dupont, who's an Italian. It was the first performance in Vienna, and we're performing it in Australia for an English-speaking audience. It really can be anywhere, and it can relate to anyone. What else does he say over here? It's set in an Australian setting. One of the things that really entertained me during the whole thing, I could identify with some things. We've just had the Cricket World Cup, and at one stage it probably went unnoticed by a lot of people, but one of the principal characters was moving to the edge of the stage, and he played a shot pretending he had a cricket bat in his hand, lofting a six over mid-on. and I thought that was brilliant, but no one else sort of laughed at it or even noticed it, I don't think. But I thought, well, that was deliberately put in there. That was choreographed in there. And the other thing, as a former wedding photographer, there was actually a photographer in this show, and at special balls and things, and particularly at the wedding, he was wandering around with a camera. I couldn't work it out. I was fairly close, but I think it was probably a digital SLR. But he was wandering around. The flash wasn't going off, but he was taking photos of what was going on, and particularly the wedding scenes. And at one stage, there's a big wedding group shot there, and he's lining it up, and he's down on one knee like I used to do and lining the shot up. And I was sort of watching his moves during the night and thinking, yeah, he knows, that guy, whoever it is, he's probably done a bit of photography, or he's been trained by a photographer to know what to do and how to stand and how to line things up. So I enjoyed that part of it, apart from the singing. Ripped from the headlines, the scandals you read and hear about daily are in this show. It's not that removed from real life. One thing in particular that's very relatable is the sense of entitlement. The way someone like the Count would feel he could make a move on anyone else's partner or an undersecretary who wants to move up in the workplace hierarchy. It goes on about the politics. That's one of the guys there is involved in this. A Figaro for all to love. This is what Nicholas Cannon says. For anyone who might be apprehensive, I can't emphasize enough that this production is still the Marriage of Figaro we all know and love. I'm not straying from the core features and relationships of the opera. The all-important music drives it all, and I'm completely respectful of that at its core. It's still the Marriage of Figaro. It's just got some modern frilly bits on top. The experience will be somewhat traditional, but with a fresh approach. We were coming home afterwards, and we thoroughly enjoyed it and the music, but it was more the acting performances of the singers, in particular Jessica Dean, who's just a marvel. And she's a very great singer and also actress as well. And we were talking about on the way home in that sometimes you go out to a show. We've been to a few 60s revival type shows and things like that, and you can be coming home and you're humming the music or singing the song and whatever. The Marriage of Figaro is not, unless you are an opera buff, you wouldn't necessarily know the tunes as household tunes that you're very familiar with, that you heard on the radio. but the actual opera stays with you. It was the actual performance and the storyline and all that, coupled with the beautiful music. But it's not that sort of, it's not a, I guess it might have been in its day, people might have gone home in their horse and carriage humming away, but that wasn't that sort of opera. It didn't have that effect on us, but we did enjoy it. Some parts I thought, oh, I don't really like that part, but overall it was pretty good. So there you go, The Marriage of Figaro. Wonderful. I tried to look to see if there was any actual clips on the front here. There's a few shots from the actual rehearsals and things like that, I think, going on there. I'll just give you the cast, if I can find the main players or the main people. The creative team was Tobias Ringborg, Ringborg, was the conductor. Nicholas Cannon was the director. Lisa Patterson, set and costume designer. Nigel Levings, lighting designer. Anthony Hunt, the chorus master. He's actually the husband of Jessica Dean, who's the main lead in the show, and he's a very talented guy as well. Jeremy Kleeman, Figaro. I mentioned Jessica Dean as Susanna. Nicholas Lester is Count Almaviva. Peter Cavallaro, the Countess. Emily Edmonds Cherubino. She was brilliant, that girl that was doing that role. And I thought her and Jessica Dean were the pick of all of them. Pelham Andrews as Dr. Bartolo. Pelham Andrews has been a member of the State Opera in South Australia for some time, and he's got this wonderful deep voice. And he was in a lesser role, but still important. And Cherie Bugart was Marcelina, and she was very animated. And I read earlier in here that they were basing some of this on her performance on those Real Housewives shows, I think. So that was interesting. Mark Oates has been involved in opera in South Australia for some time. He was good. Lucy Stoddart was Barbarina. Jeremy Tatchell was Antonio. Jeremy Tatchell has been around a long time. Jiasheng Ding was Curtzio. He's also in the chorus. Jessica Mills was the first bridesmaid and in the chorus. And Eric Chmielewski is a security guard. And the State Opera and chorus was there as well. So all in all, it was pretty good. And if you want to get a chance to go and see it, there's another little note here too. This young lady didn't make the actual program when they printed it, but she is Courtney Turner, Canadian-Australian mezzo-soprano, and she was involved as well. So, thanks for watching. I have reviewed other operas and shows on my blog, in particular in the past. I might see if I can find a link or two to one of those. And anyway, I hope that's stimulated, inspired you. There's nothing like when, we've had our challenges lately, and it's nothing like going out to a good show to have your spirits lifted, and particularly when you're sitting in the front row. It was amazing. And we might try and get those seats again sometime. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Like if you like, subscribe if you wish, and I'll see you next time.